Welcome back to Monday Musings, a casual conversation about culture and theology. I'm Justin Ely.
And I'm Daniel Chen. We're just a couple guys talking about some stuff.
But today, we're three guys talking about some stuff.
Yes.
We have with us the one, the only, the eldest elder from Christ Fellowship Church, the businessman extraordinaire and philanthropist global, Charley Malmquist.
Yes.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks for being here. We're going to do a podcast today on rethinking retirement. So, the common American dream is that you work really, really hard until you're about 60, 65.
Yeah.
And then you live out the rest of your days on a yacht.
Yeah. You know what's funny? I feel like especially in our generation, I feel like, do any of your friends talk about retiring at 50 now, 45? Like, I feel like a lot of people have this dream now of, I don't want to work anymore past a certain age. That's like, it's not even 65, I feel like, with
right.
a lot of people.
Really, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know many people personally that fall into that category, but I know a lot do.
I've seen a lot on social media. I've heard a lot of people talk about it. So yeah, I just find it really interesting. But that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, so we're excited to do that. But before we get into it, we have our Restaurant of the Month segment.
Awesome.
So Daniel, what do you got?
So my Restaurant of the Month is a restaurant around this area called Taco Macho.
So you went, okay.
So we Justin and I went on Monday. So it's a taco restaurant, authentic taco restaurant. With the corn tortillas and the meat is, it's not like a Tex-Mex restaurant. It's like a Mexican restaurant. My Hispanic neighbors were raving about it online, and my other friend in the neighborhood is from Texas, and he said this is the best taco place he's been to since moving from Texas.
Wow.
And so we went on Monday. I went again yesterday, actually.
You did?
Yeah. And because I was getting lunch and they suggested it, and I was like, why not? And it's, we were the only non-Hispanic people there. That's how you know it's good, Right. Yeah. And so if you're not from this area, find yourself just like a good, authentic taco place. But it was delicious. But if you do live around this area, Taco Macho off of Jones Bridge.
There you go. My Restaurant of the Month is Food Terminal off of North Point Parkway. We Hillary and I do like a date night in sometimes.
Yeah.
So we get the kids off even earlier to bed, load them up with cough syrup, douse them, just go straight to sleep, And
you don't give them that whiskey or whatever. Yeah.
Some of Grandpa's cough syrup, and we order in, and so we did Food Terminal. Never had it. Recommended by Brent and Caitlin Taylor, so we knew it would be good. And it was fantastic. I had Grandma's barbecue pork tossed noodle.
That's such a long name.
Featuring Grandma's secret barbecue pork recipe, this popular Cantonese tossed noodle is served with Food Terminal's signature noodle, fried wonton, bok choy, bean sprout, spring onion, fried egg, and fried shallots.
Yeah.
It was life-changing.
It's interesting with Food Terminal. So, when people don't know what kind of Asian food it is, people just say Chinese, but it's actually Malaysian food.
That's very racist.
It is, yeah. I'm personally deeply offended.
Yeah.
But
for our listeners, Daniel is Chinese. It's just you can't see him.
That's so funny. Yeah, I guess people are like, "Yeah, your voice just sounds so American." I'm like, "Well, I guess that's what happens when
also
I'm born."
racist." Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's interesting to me the diversity of different Asian foods that's come out in the past 20 years.
Yeah.
Just interesting. It's very good. Food Terminal's super good.
It's really good. Charley, as our special guest, do you have a Restaurant of the Month for us?
Thank you. I do. Santorini's is a new Greek restaurant that provides authentic Greek cooking. It opened last week, and interestingly enough, it appears that they have chosen all authentic Greek men to serve you as your waiter. They were getting their act together. My wife Julie and I went, and it was their second day opening, so they were still kind of figuring out the kinks.
Okay.
But the food, if you like Greek food, it was wonderful.
Ooh.
So
That's a good tip for my
Santorini's.
wife.
Yeah.
She loves
She's a big Greek.
Oh, she loves Greek food. Yeah. So I'll have to take. She loves pita and hummus and like the fresh veggies and stuff. So.
Well, it is extremely good. I can't tell you exactly what I ate, but it was fat noodles with some kind of really wonderful, fresh vegetables and all sorts of stuff on top.
Yeah. If you say it's good,
We're there.
It's good.
we're there. Yeah.
It was good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so if you need to pause this podcast and go eat at one of those restaurants, we understand. Actually, just bring us with you in the car.
Yes.
Keep talking to you. So today we're talking about retirement, and we have asked Charley to be here because I think Charley has a really interesting story and has personally rethought retirement, I think, as one in the retirement age. So we're going to kind of talk about Charley's career a little bit and how he thought about retirement growing up and throughout his career, and then what's kind of changed along the way. So Charley, just to start with, could you kind of share a brief overview of your career with us?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Justin. Actually, my career started a little different than most. Back in the day when I graduated from college, I was graduated with a major in risk management and insurance. And in the 70s, that wasn't a highly sought-after degree. So I was in a very small number that graduated from the University of Alabama. Had to put that plug in.
Go Dogs.
So don't turn off the podcast just quite yet. Anyway, so graduated in a very small group. The head of the department took a personal interest in all of those graduating with the risk management and insurance major. So rather than going through the traditional recruiting interviews, my professor got me an interview with the president of the St. Paul Fire and Marine Insurance Company in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Huh.
So,
Can I ask real quick, Charley?
Sure.
Why is it that was just insurance not that big in the 70s?
The Geico commercials hadn't come out yet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Why is that the case? That risk management insurance wasn't?
So
as...
insurance has long had this bad reputation of the high pressure kind of salesperson that sells life insurance. And so consequently, to pursue that as a major, a lot of my friends would go, really? That's what you're going to do with your life? But again, insurance and risk management, crosses all sorts of boundaries. It was a great, foundation for what I pursued. But so when I interviewed with the president of the St. Paul, I quickly learned that you don't say no to a president. And so I didn't. I said yes, and I worked for the St. Paul for 5 years in a couple of different capacities. Underwriting, which was basically evaluating risk for the company, to marketing, which was basically to support the agents that were representing their products. So then I had an opportunity after that 5-year period to join a independent insurance agency here in Atlanta. It had begun its work in 1918, so it had a rich history. It specialized in professional liability for doctors and hospitals, and it was an agency ahead of its time because it was doing niche marketing back in 1918 before there was ever the term niche or to explore that. Little did I know that after 8 years of being with the organization, that I would be given the opportunity to purchase the agency from the existing shareholders. again, given the opportunity, I said yes. So at age 36, I purchased the agency and began operating it, and took it in a direction that it had not gone before. It was very small, kind of a boutique, but with a dedicated staff over the next 25 years. I was able to grow the agency to one of the leading agencies providing professional liability programs for healthcare workers in 22 states.
Wow.
Also, during my 40 years in the insurance business, I had the privilege of serving as the president of the Independent Insurance Agents of Atlanta. And then after that, also served as the president of the Independent Insurance Agents of Georgia. It was during that time that I began to learn or feel the joy of being able to give back and to serve.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to say too, I love hearing your story because most of the kids at our church would know you as, Mr. Charlie who dresses up as the elf or in whatever costume that you and your wife Julie have come up with. And I just love the humility that, just hearing what you did in buying the company and how you grew and expanded it. Just love personally just how you have invested back into our church, especially into our kids ministry, and the humility that you show. It just means a lot, I think, for even guys our age that are in the process of wanting to buy a company, wanting to start their own thing. So thank you for your example of that too. I love that fact about you that you're just fun Mr. Charlie to all the kids in our ministry, but you have this really cool story in your career and the business that you built. And because I feel like for a lot of people today, building a business is the dream for a lot of people. And
sure.
It's cool that you were able to do that. So.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So you said 25 years there?
25 years,
okay,
yeah.
So you started at 36. You bought it at 36. And then so that's going to bring you to 61. Am I doing my math right?
Yep.
36 plus 25.
Yep.
Go Dogs.
Definitely.
Okay. So
what did I do at 61?
Yes, yeah.
So my goal and desire was to perpetuate the organization from within. And interestingly enough, after some different attempts, that wasn't successful. So I identified an international broker that was interested in acquiring my business and then providing me an opportunity to exit.
Okay.
So
there you go.
I sold the business.
Okay. So thinking about, retirement, so how did you think about retirement when you were a kid? Let's start there, and then we're going to kind of go through different phases.
So the kind of modern day retirement back in the 1950s when I was a kid was relatively new. As the U.S. was becoming wealthier, as there was better access to food, to better access to health care and transportation, the whole family dynamics were changing. So people began living longer and retired with a much longer period of time than ever before. Retirement came as a reward for doing a job well done. The focus was on doing things that one couldn't do during their working years. So focus was on leisure, on golf or travel and family, on spending more time with the grandchildren or hobbies or just a period of relaxation. But prior to the 1950s, people continued to work out of necessity. Social Security, which kind of came about in first payments being made in the 1940s were so small, plus company pensions were also, if they existed, they were small. So it was insufficient to really support people. And so younger family members would find themselves responsible for taking care of their aging parents.
Sure.
And so they generally live closer. So retirement was pretty short. It was somewhere between a 5 and 10 year period. That compares to now 70 years later, where many people today will retire with a period as long as or close to the number of years that they worked.
Sure.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So would you say in that period before the 50s or even the 50s, was 65 still the target age that people wanted to retire, or was that different as well?
So probably in the 50s, the 65 kind of came out because it
Gotcha.
was some of the initial age that was identified for Social Security, receiving that first payment.
Gotcha. Okay. So that was a government kind of instituted
Right.
number. Okay.
Yeah. So also when I was a kid and was in my teens, I saw my grandfather retire from a very successful career in banking, and then several weeks later he suffered a stroke.
Oh, wow.
And it was a very debilitating stroke. And so it would affect how I viewed retirement as in my later years.
Meaning, retire. Like, if you retire, you're going to have a stroke, and
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So kind of a negative feeling in your childhood because of that.
Correct.
And it's kind of new, you were saying, on the scene as far as culture goes from the way we think about it. What about in your 20s, the start of your career?
Okay.
How are you viewing it?
So in my 20s, my focus was on pursuing my career and, building my family or providing for my family. So I really didn't think about retiring. I remember it seemed so far off that it was a distant concern. So again, I think there is much more attention given to it by young people today
Sure.
than ever before.
Okay. What about in your 40s? You're kind of midway through your career.
Yeah.
How are you thinking about it?
So in my 40s, I had adopted already a financial plan that would permit me to retire at the normal age 65 back then, if I wanted to. But the plan was also to address what ifs if I was not able to continue to work. So sometimes I would say that addressing the financial side of retirement is the easy part. Addressing how you'll spend your retirement time is perhaps sometimes the greater challenge.
Sure.
But at age 40, I was actually still enjoying my work and kind of, in full stride in my career. And so, again, retirement really wasn't thought of as something that I was aiming for.
Sure. So take us to you're 61, you've sold your company, you've achieved what most people would only dream of, right? You started your own company and then it was successful enough to be sold. So how are you thinking about retirement at that point?
Okay. As I mentioned earlier, I was deeply affected by the stroke that my grandfather had after just retiring weeks before. And so I associated retiring with having a stroke. Well,
Yeah.
so in my mind, I didn't want to ever retire.
Right.
Yeah. But God used that concern and that fear to have me consider transforming my efforts in a totally different direction.
And so how did you go about that? I mean,
So after much prayer, I left my paying job to pursue something quite different from my experience or my training. And what I did is to adapt my capabilities to where God was leading me. And I began serving as a full-time volunteer for a Kenya-based organization dedicated to saving children's lives and growing God's kingdom. I have worked as the marketing and communications director for Mully Children's Family for the last 10 years. God used this to open my eyes to the difference between being successful and being significant.
And how would you distinguish those two, success versus significance?
I think success is something that we measure in a way of financial success or in reaching, certain levels of authority or leadership or whatever. Significance is making a difference for God's kingdom.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I think, too, it makes sense. If you guys want to share maybe briefly Charles Mully's story and how that probably shaped what you're talking about, because he basically had it made in Kenya but decided to use, quote unquote, his retirement to save the lives of literally thousands and thousands of orphans. If maybe we can share that quickly, his story too. I feel like it ties in really well because of his quote unquote retirement.
Talk about Charlie, you'd be the better person than me, but talk about an example of retirement.
Right.
Yeah.
So the story of Charles Mully begins with the fact that his family could no longer provide, and Charles was born in Kenya, but his family could no longer provide for the family sufficient food to feed their family. So consequently, they chose to leave Charles behind. And he woke up one morning as an orphan. He spent his teenage years trying to survive on any way that he could, and that was included begging or dumpster diving, as we call it. But someone brought him to a religious meeting, and he met the Lord there, and he accepted him as his Savior. From that, Charles found a prominent family that was farming in Kenya, and from there he was able to progress and to basically obtain a position of leadership within the agricultural farming that they were doing. That led to him being able to put aside some money, and essentially he bought his first taxi, and from that he grew that into owning many taxis, many buses, became very wealthy, and then one day he was in Nairobi and his car was stolen by street kids. As he took his ride back home that day, all he could see was the faces of street boys, and it changed him. He realized that God was calling him back to help those that were living on the street, those that were orphaned and abandoned and abused. And so he gave up his paying job and began rescuing kids. And over the next 33 years, he's rescued over 26,000 children from the street and have provided them with a new direction and an ability to live dignified lives and to serve as disciples of Christ.
Yeah, talk about rethinking retirement.
Yeah, I mean, I think I love the successful significance paradigm, right? That most people want to have a successful career only to live a insignificant retirement.
Sure.
And I think we're doing this podcast because we want everyone listening to have a successful career. Like, we wish that for you, but so that you can have a significant retirement.
Sure.
Just like Charles Mully and you as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have you ever read Bob Buford's Halftime
I
book.
have.
Is that? I have not read it. Is the Success to Significance? Is that from his book?
It is.
Okay.
Right. And essentially, the book addresses the. Well, let me step back. Bob was a very successful TV owner, owned TV stations,
Okay.
cable TV, and in his midlife, he realized that there was more to that. He'd made his success here on earth, but he was directed toward more godly efforts. So the book is about challenging people to kind of rethink retirement, to rethink their values, and it's a good read. If someone is struggling or wanting to plan for their future, regardless of age, I think it's a great book to
What's
kind
up?
of look.
What's it called again?
Halftime.
Halftime.
Right.
By
Okay.
Bob Buford. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So what advice would you give people currently in the workforce about how to biblically think about retirement?
Okay. So actually, retirement is not a biblical concept, but it's a cultural one. In fact, the actual word retire in my research only appears in the NIV translation of the Bible in Numbers 8:23 through 26. But I think the actual intent remains the same even in the ESV version. And in these verses, the Lord kind of said to Moses, this applies to the Levites. Men 25 years old or more shall take part in the work at the tent of meeting, but at age 50, they must retire from regular service and work no longer. They may assist their brothers in performing their duties at the tent of meeting, but they themselves must not do the work. This then is how you are to assign their duties. I think the underlying principle here is that when a Levite turned 50 years old, their responsibilities did not end, but simply changed. And they would transition to a different responsibility, serving outside of the tent of meeting. So, not biblical, but I'd pose this question to those who are still working. Are you looking forward more to retirement or to heaven?
Ooh, yeah.
Man, I'll preach. We're gonna
I'll
steal all this
preach.
stuff from you,
Yeah.
Charlie.
No, that's good.
So retirement is certainly more tangible, and it is something that is tempting, but we all know, as we sit here, that heaven is so much better. So keeping that perspective, regardless of your age, will help you to make wise decisions later, now, as well as later in life. Because I guess I would challenge that it is never too early to begin planning for how your time and talents can be used for kingdom work.
That's good. That's a really good paradigm. Are you looking more forward to retirement or heaven? That's a good heart check. So what advice would you give people? They're already retired. They're living in the Villages, Florida's friendliest hometown. They're golfing 3-4 times a week. What do you tell them? Get off the golf course.
So if God's provided you with taking care of your financial needs so that you don't have to work, you have to realize that's a privilege that historically very, very few people had.
Yeah.
Sure.
And one of the greatest opportunities that we have is to serve. So all these people who are in retirement have many gifts and skills over their years of work that may help people and ministries benefit from. So retirement, I view retirement as a phase in your life where you can use the gifts and skills and abilities to glorify God in a different way. If God has given you breath, it's because he still has work for you to do.
Yeah.
So our goal should be to finish well.
That's good.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say in retirement, maybe corporate work stops, but kingdom work doesn't, right?
Right.
That's well said.
And so I think people kind of view work as kind of just like a binary, like you're either working or you're not. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like, through your career, you have corporate work and kingdom work, but maybe at 65 or 60 or whatever age, if God has blessed you enough that you can financially not do that business work anymore, the kingdom work never stops until you die.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, well, as a church planter and a pastor, I am grateful for your view of retirement because you and Julie have just been so invaluable in our church and how much a labor of love you've given to this church that wouldn't fully be possible if you were working full time. The amount of work you poured into this church, you probably could not have done when you were at the peak of your career. But I'm just very grateful that you've chosen to use your retirement from a means of service rather than indulgence,
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah.
And again, I view this as God giving me the opportunity to serve him and to serve the kingdom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. And I just want to say too, it's just for you guys listening out there. I feel like the idea of the like intergenerational is just super important because I know in our church, which is mostly, people our age in their 30s with 2 kids under 5.
With a white picket fence in their house and 1.5 dogs.
Right. All of our...
I threw you off. No one has a white picket fence. Okay, I'll just clear.
All of our, there's a community group we have called the North of 50 group.
We call it the I-50 North.
Yes, but seriously, every single person is so invaluable in that group to our church because we, like, as 2 younger pastors,
we're now middle-aged by many accounts. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
And so I would just encourage you too, if you are retired, go invest in the younger young men and women at the church.
Absolutely.
Because I feel like I've talked to some that feel like they don't want to hear from me or that, I don't know what my place is here. And I'm like, in some ways, you have one of the most important roles to play in the church because you have so much wisdom. And I feel like just sitting in our elders meetings or whatever, just gleaning wisdom, it's just invaluable. And so, and so I think, as we aim for retirement, be thinking of not just like what do you want to do leisurely, but what kingdom work do you want to do as that you're looking forward to that you can't now maybe because of the constraints of the time you spend at work.
Yeah. I think of C.S. Lewis's quote, it wasn't about retirement, but aim for heaven and you get earth thrown in, aim for earth and you get neither. Just the joy of living for the kingdom.
So kind of closing words that I'd like to share is that if people are still struggling with finding a way, their plan, there's a book by Franklin Graham called Living Beyond the Limits. And it is to help identify a life in sync with God. And when you can find that path, it creates a lot of joy. I'm reminded by Philippians 1:6 that I am certain that God, who began the good work within you, will continue this work until it is finally finished on the day when Jesus Christ returns.
Amen.
Yeah.
Good words. Well, Charlie, thanks for joining us for this podcast. Thanks for your wisdom on retirement. And we hope you were encouraged if you're in the workforce to kind of have a vision for kingdom significance beyond your dollar-making years. And if you are currently in that retirement phase, maybe a vision for how you can leverage your gifts for the kingdom.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think too, whenever I think about this topic, I think about the sermon that made John Piper famous, the Don't Waste Your Life sermon.
Seashells.
The Seashells one.
Yeah.
And maybe we can link it in the bio, but
Sure.
To give that a listen too.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us. We will talk to you next week about something interesting.
Yeah.
Bye.